He told me his mother was dead. I believed him for years, until I saw her walk out of his house. When I asked him, he said, "You weren't supposed to know." That's when I started recording everything. I don't know why I've always been drawn to the idea of a fairy tale romance. Maybe it's the way people talk about love in books or movies, or maybe it's because, deep down, I've always been waiting for someone to come along and sweep me off my feet. When I met Ethan, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was finally living that fantasy. It started so naturally. I wasn't even looking for love when we met. I had just moved into a new apartment in the city, the kind of place where the walls creak when the wind blows, but at least it had a decent view of the skyline. I'd been busy with work, trying to make sense of a life that felt like it was constantly in transition. Then came Ethan, the man I never saw coming. He was the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He didn't just listen, he really heard you. His gaze would linger a little longer than usual, and when he smiled, you felt like the world just got a little brighter. At first, it seemed like a dream. He was charming, charismatic, and so easy to talk to. We met at a coffee shop of all places, where he accidentally spilled his drink on me, then insisted on buying me a new one. I'd laughed it off, not realizing that this clumsy, sweet gesture would turn into something more. As we spent more time together, I started to see him not just as a man I liked, but as someone I could really trust. He shared stories of his life, his childhood, the things that shaped him. The more I learned about him, the more it seemed like fate had brought us together. One night, after we'd been seeing each other for about a month, we sat at a small bistro near the park. The weather was cool, a light breeze ruffling the trees, and the soft hum of the city wrapped around us like a blanket. I remember the way he looked at me as we shared dessert. There was something about the way he looked, like he was trying to decide whether to tell me something important. "I've never told anyone this," he said softly, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his wine glass. "About what?" I asked, curious but not pressing. "About my mother. She died when I was younger. Car accident. I don't usually talk about it." The way he said it caught me off guard. His voice had shifted, the warmth fading into something quieter, more distant. I could feel the weight of his words before I even processed them. His eyes seemed to dim for a moment, as though the memories had a life of their own and wanted to resurface, even if it wasn't the right time. "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to say. He shook his head, forcing a smile. "It's all right. It was a long time ago, but it still feels hard sometimes. You know, she was everything to me." There was something raw about the way he spoke, something that made me want to pull him closer, to shield him from whatever pain still haunted him. I could tell he was trying not to show how much it affected him, but it was clear. It wasn't just a memory, it was a wound, one that had never fully healed. "What was she like?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, wanting him to feel safe enough to share. He paused, searching for the right words. She was, she was everything I could have asked for. Strong, caring. She was my rock. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, an almost imperceptible shadow. But then he looked away, breaking the moment. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, as if brushing it off. "I didn't mean to make things heavy. Let's not talk about this tonight." I nodded, though a small knot formed in my stomach. I wasn't sure what it was, but something about the way he shut down felt like a door closing in my face. It wasn't anger or even sadness. It was more like a hidden corner of him that he didn't want to share with anyone, a corner I had just stumbled upon. The night went on, and we laughed and joked, like we always did. But his words stayed with me, hovering at the back of my mind like an unfinished sentence. A few days later, things started to feel almost too perfect. Ethan was always there for me, calling, texting, showing up unexpectedly with flowers, or offering to cook dinner. Everything felt so right, but there was this subtle unease I couldn't shake. I noticed small things that seemed out of place. The way he checked his phone constantly, the sudden, unexplained absences. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone has their secrets, right? Their own little parts of life that they don't share. But then, one evening, I saw something that made my heart stop. I was coming home from work, walking toward my apartment, when I saw Ethan. He didn't see me, though. He was walking up to a house I didn't recognize. It was an older building tucked away on a quiet street, not too far from where I lived. I paused in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. What was he doing here? He knocked on the door, and after a brief moment, it opened. And there, standing in the doorway, was a woman. She was older, with graying hair and soft features. But what struck me the most was the way Ethan greeted her. His face softened, and he hugged her tightly. It was the kind of hug that said everything. This was someone important, someone he cared about deeply. But how could that be? He had told me his mother was dead. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Why was he here? Who was this woman? And why had he never told me about her? I wanted to turn around, to leave, but something inside me refused to let go. My thoughts tangled, questions piling up, and a cold sense of dread settled over me. I had to know what was going on. I had to understand. And so, I made a decision. This was just the beginning. I had no idea then how much everything would change, how much I would lose, how deep the lies ran. But in that moment, I was too curious, too confused to walk away. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, the image of Ethan hugging that woman playing on repeat in my mind. The way he looked at her, like she was the most important person in the world. It didn't make sense. His mother was supposed to be dead. He had told me so. So why was he standing there? So comfortable, so familiar, with someone who clearly meant a lot to him. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself it was probably just a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a distant relative, an aunt or a friend of the family. I convinced myself that there had to be a simple explanation, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. The next few days, things were off. Ethan seemed distant, and I found myself watching him more closely than I ever had before. He was always kind, always attentive, but something had shifted. There were moments when his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, when his laughter sounded too forced. When he was with me, it was as if there was a barrier between us, something unspoken but heavy, hanging in the air. I noticed how he checked his phone constantly, as if he were waiting for a message or a call. Whenever I asked him what was going on, he'd smile and brush it off. Just work, he'd say, but I wasn't buying it. I knew him well enough by now to see the lie in his eyes. There were also the disappearances. He'd disappear for hours sometimes, claiming he had things to do, errands, meetings, work, things I never seemed to understand. It was strange, really, how often he was busy and how little he ever talked about it. He never offered any details, just vague excuses that left me feeling more and more uncertain. It wasn't until one evening, about a week after I had seen him at that woman's house, that I could take it no longer. I had to know. I had told myself I wouldn't snoop. I'd promised myself that I would trust him, but the more I thought about it, the more his strange behavior gnawed at me. There were just too many unanswered questions. So, when he told me he was going to work late, I decided to follow him. I waited for him to leave, grabbing my coat and slipping quietly out the door after him. My heart raced as I trailed behind, careful not to be seen. I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal, that I wasn't doing something crazy, but deep down I knew. I wasn't just following him. I was looking for something. something that might explain all of this, something that might finally make sense of the tangled mess of my thoughts. He didn't go to work that night. I watched him from a distance as he turned a corner and made his way to the same house I had seen him visit before. The woman was there again, standing in the doorway waiting for him. My heart slammed against my ribs as I watched them exchange a few words before he stepped inside. I stood frozen, my feet rooted to the ground. I should have turned around and gone home. I should have erased the image from my mind, but I couldn't. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready to face the truth. I lingered for what felt like hours, watching the house from the shadows. Every time a car passed, my pulse spiked. Every sound made me jump, and yet I couldn't bring myself to leave. The longer I stayed, the more the knot in my stomach tightened. Finally, I saw the lights inside flicker off, signaling that they were done for the night. Ethan and the woman emerged, standing on the porch for a moment. It looked like they were saying goodbye. She kissed him on the cheek, affectionate but not romantic. I couldn't see her face clearly, but something in the way she looked at him felt familiar, almost like a mother to a son. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe I thought he'd come out of the house looking guilty, or that I'd catch him in some lie. Instead, I stood there, frozen, watching him leave with her in the direction of her car. They shared one more quick kiss, nothing passionate, but still intimate. Then they parted ways. I didn't move. I was shaking now, both from the cold and from the overwhelming sense of betrayal. He had lied. It was clear now. His mother hadn't died. She was alive, and everything he'd told me was a lie. I had to know more. The next morning, I could barely look at him when he came over. I greeted him with a forced smile, trying to keep the questions that were bubbling inside me from spilling out. "Morning," he said, giving me a warm kiss on the cheek as usual. But I could feel the distance now, between us, between me and the person he had shown me he was. We sat down to breakfast, and for the first time, I noticed how carefully he watched me, as if waiting for something, as if he knew something was wrong. "You look a little off," he remarked, reaching for his coffee. "Is everything okay?" I swallowed hard, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm fine, just tired." But my mind was anything but fine. It was racing, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. Later that day, when he was out running errands, always so vague about where he was going, I made up my mind. I would find out the truth. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore, with this twisted web of lies hanging over me. I started with his phone. It was a shot in the dark, but I had to try. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but as I unlocked his phone, the first thing that caught my eye was a message thread with a contact labeled simply MOM. The conversation was brief, but it was clear they had been talking recently. I scrolled up, my heart pounding as I found a photo, one that had been taken not long ago. There she was, the woman I had seen him with, his mother alive and well, just like I had suspected. But then something else stopped me cold. Another name, another thread, his ex-wife, and another, and another. The lies, the manipulation, the hidden secrets. It was all there. My stomach twisted as I realized just how deep this went. When Ethan returned, I pretended nothing was wrong. I smiled, acted normal, but inside my mind was unraveling. I was no longer the woman who believed in him. I was the woman who was about to uncover everything, and I was going to make him pay for it. The more I uncovered, the less I recognized the man I had fallen for. The phone messages, the old photos, the lies buried in every corner of his life. It was all there. His mother had been alive all this time, and that was just the beginning. The more I dug, the more it became clear Ethan was not who he had led me to believe. I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. The curiosity, the need to uncover the truth, consumed me. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop now. It was as if every new piece of information was a step closer to exposing a version of Ethan that was buried beneath layers of lies. The documents I found were more than enough to confirm my worst fears. Birth certificates, legal papers, and even old bills. They painted a picture of a man with a history far more complicated than he had ever let on. A history that didn't just include his dead mother, but also a string of former relationships, women who had been hurt by him, manipulated, or worse. I found records of restraining orders, legal disputes, and even a police report. Nothing too recent, but enough to make my blood run cold. It wasn't just that he had lied to me. It was the fact that he had used me, just as he had used all of them. I was just another pawn in his game, another person to control, to manipulate, into believing his carefully crafted version of reality. But it wasn't just the documents that shook me. It was the discovery that Ethan knew I had found them. I didn't realize he was watching me until it was too late. I was in the middle of going through an old journal I had found hidden in the back of a drawer when I heard the front door creak open. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Hey!" His voice called out from the hallway, warm and casual, too casual. "You're up early." I froze, the journal still open in my hands. The pieces of paper scattered across the floor. It felt like the walls were closing in around me, the weight of my own deceit pressing down on me. I slammed the journal shut, trying to act natural. Yeah, just couldn't sleep. He stepped into the living room, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. I was trying so hard to hide the panic, to keep my expression neutral, but I could feel my pulse racing, my hands trembling as I tried to stand. "What's all this?" he asked, taking a step closer to the mess I had made of his life. I was caught, and he knew it. I could see it in his eyes, the way his gaze hardened, the way his jaw clenched. He wasn't angry yet, but I could feel the storm brewing inside him. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is all this, Ethan?" I repeated, my words colder than I intended. "What have you been hiding from me?" His smile faltered, and for the briefest of moments, I saw something dark and almost predatory, flashing in his eyes. "You've been snooping," he said quietly, almost as if it were a statement, not a question. I couldn't answer. I couldn't look at him. I had already seen enough to know what kind of man he really was. The man who had manipulated me, who had lied to me every step of the way. The man who had used his mother's death as an excuse to hide the truth. "I didn't mean for you to find all this," Ethan said, his voice now eerily calm. "But you need to understand, there are things that are better left buried." I felt a chill run through me, a coldness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "What do you mean buried?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He took a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. "You wouldn't understand. You can't. This is bigger than you, than us." His voice was low now, almost a whisper. "You don't know what I've been through." I didn't back down. "I think I know more than enough," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I know about your mother. I know about your exes. And I know that I've been living a lie." His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw the rage simmering beneath the surface. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? You think you can just tear apart my life with a few pieces of paper?" "I don't need to tear it apart," I said, stepping back, the cold weight of my words hanging in the air. "You've already done that yourself." There was a long pause, one that stretched on far too long. Ethan was no longer pretending to be the loving, attentive man I had fallen for. He was someone else now, someone I didn't recognize. The facade was slipping away, and all I could see was the dark, twisted truth that lay beneath. Then, in a flash, the tension snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing me by the arm, his grip like iron. "Don't you dare think you can expose me. I will destroy you if you try." Fear rippled through me, but something inside me, something cold and calculating, held me steady. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I looked him in the eye, unblinking. "You're not going to destroy anyone anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "You're going to lose everything." He let go of my arm, taking a step back, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with each breath. I could see the war inside him, the battle between rage and something else, something darker. But I knew, in that moment, I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from, and neither could he. I had exposed him, and now I would make him pay for everything he had done. The days that followed felt like a slow descent into madness. Ethan was different. His anger was no longer veiled. His quiet fury simmered beneath every word he spoke, every glance he gave. It was clear that I had pushed him too far, and now I was at his mercy. I knew he was capable of anything, and the terror of that knowledge gnawed at me every time he was around. But even in my fear, there was something else, something darker growing inside me. I had made my decision. I was done being the victim. That night he returned late, as he often did now, and when he walked through the door, the silence was suffocating. I could feel him watching me from the moment he stepped into the room. His eyes, cold and calculating, never left me. But I refused to show weakness. I refused to let him see how terrified I was. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was hammering in my chest. "Fine," he said, his voice clipped, the tension in the room so thick it almost felt like I could touch it. "You've been digging into things again, haven't you?" I looked up at him, my eyes unwavering. "I had to. You left me no choice." His gaze hardened, but he didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, as if measuring me. His silence was more menacing than any words could be. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You really think you can expose me like this? You think the truth will set you free?" I didn't answer him. The truth was already in my hands, and it was much stronger than any of his lies. His gaze flickered for a brief moment, and I saw it. The hint of fear in his eyes, a flash of vulnerability. It was only there for an instant, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I had never seen him this way before. His whole life had been built on lies, and I had torn it apart in a matter of days. The realization of what I had done settled over me like a heavy fog. "I'm not going to back down," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You've lied to me for too long, and now it's time for everyone to know who you really are." I could see his jaw clench, his fists balling at his sides. "You're making a huge mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "Am I?" I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. "I don't think so." The silence between us was thick with unspoken threats. But as much as I feared him, I couldn't turn away now. I had seen the depths of his manipulation, the way he controlled every aspect of his life. I was no longer just his girlfriend. I was the one holding the power. I had found his secrets, his lies. I had exposed him for the fraud he was. And now it was time to take it further. The next day, I set my plan into motion. I knew I couldn't trust Ethan to come clean on his own. He would never admit the truth willingly. So, I would force him to. I would take control of the narrative, and in doing so, I would make him suffer. I had already set up the cameras in secret, capturing every conversation we had, every subtle lie he told, every moment he thought he was getting away with his games. I'd been recording for days, building a dossier of everything he had hidden from me, and then I took it a step further. I sent copies of everything to his exes, each of the women he had used, discarded, and manipulated. They had a right to know the man they had once loved was the same man who had been lying to me, the same man who had destroyed them and moved on to the next victim. I wasn't going to let him keep getting away with it. Not anymore. But I wasn't done yet. I knew Ethan's mother was the key. She had been a central part of his web of lies, and if I could expose the truth about her, I would destroy the last shred of his carefully constructed facade. She had to be involved somehow. Her presence had always been part of the puzzle. So I did what I had to do. I sent her everything: the evidence of Ethan's lies, the documents, the photos, the recordings. When the message went through, I felt a strange sense of finality. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But in that moment, I didn't care. The fear that had been gnawing at me was slowly being replaced by a cold, quiet satisfaction. The man who had made me doubt myself, the man who had manipulated me, was going to lose everything. The next day, I waited. Ethan came home late again, but this time he didn't seem as composed as usual. His eyes were wild, frantic even, as if something was weighing on him. When he saw me sitting on the couch, the expression on his face shifted, like a mask slipping. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice trembling with rage and fear. I didn't answer him immediately. I let the silence hang in the air, stretching between us as the truth settled in. "I did what needed to be done," I said quietly. "You've lied to me for far too long, Ethan, and now everyone will know who you really are." He stepped toward me, his hands shaking with barely contained fury. "You think you can destroy me?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You have no idea what you've just done." The fear in his eyes was unmistakable now. He had no control anymore, and that, in itself, was the sweetest form of revenge. "You've already destroyed yourself," I said, standing up and meeting his gaze. "I just made sure everyone else would see it." The weight of my actions didn't hit me immediately. In the hours after I had sent the final pieces of Ethan's life to his exes and his mother, a strange calmness settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The fear, the uncertainty, all the knots in my stomach had loosened. I had taken control, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Ethan, on the other hand, was a different story. The quiet dread in his eyes had only deepened. I could see it in the way he moved, how his posture had slumped, how the usual confidence he carried like armor had cracked. He was no longer the charming, reliable man I thought I knew. He was a man on the verge of losing everything. That night, he came home earlier than usual, his face tight, his eyes scanning the room for something, anything, that could give him a sense of control. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me, his gaze dark with fear and fury. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to make dinner, but I was hyper-aware of his every move. I didn't need to look at him to know that he was calculating his next move, trying to figure out how to spin the web again, how to convince me that I was wrong. Finally, he broke the silence. "You really think you've won, don't you?" He spat, his voice laced with venom. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze with an icy calmness. "I don't think I've won. I know I've won." He moved toward me in one quick stride, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I feared he might hit me, but I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I had already won the moment I decided to expose him. "You're a fool," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Do you think you're the first to figure me out? You think I'm the only one with a past? You think these lies will destroy me?" I didn't say anything. He was trying to regain control, trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for him, into doubting myself. But I couldn't fall for it anymore. His words didn't have the power they used to. I watched him closely as he continued, his voice more frantic now. You have no idea who you're dealing with. You've only scratched the surface, and you're about to ruin your life. You think the world will believe you over me? My pulse quickened, but I didn't let him see it. I stepped closer, narrowing the distance between us, forcing him to look me in the eye. Do you really believe anyone will trust you after everything I've shown them? I asked, my voice as cold as ice. You've manipulated everyone you've ever met, Ethan, and now they know who you really are. You're a liar, a fraud, and now everyone will see it. His face twisted in rage, but for a brief moment there was something else, a flicker of doubt, something that resembled fear. He knew the truth. He knew it was over. His hands trembled at his sides. You don't understand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just about me. This is about you, too. I've protected you, kept you safe. You think you're better than me, but you're just as twisted as I am. You've been digging through my life like a voyeur, like some obsessed stalker. What do you think you'll get from this? Do you think they'll care about your petty revenge? You'll lose everything, too. Everyone will turn their backs on you. I took a step back, letting his words hang in the air. There was a time when I might have believed him, when I might have been afraid of losing everything. But not anymore. I wasn't the woman who had walked into this relationship blind and naive. I wasn't the woman who had fallen for his lies. I had already sacrificed my peace for the truth, and now I would see it through. Maybe I will lose everything, I said quietly, my voice steady. But I'll have the truth, and that's more than you've ever had. He took another step forward, his eyes wild, his breath coming in short gasps. You have no idea what I'm capable of, he said, his voice dripping with malice. I will ruin you. I will make sure you regret this. You already have, I replied, meeting his gaze without fear. You've already ruined yourself. All I've done is show people who you really are. And with that, the last of his resolve crumbled. He stepped back, his body slumping in defeat. The man I had once loved was no more. The mask had finally slipped, and what remained was a hollow shell of a man, broken and alone. The next few days were a whirlwind. Ethan lost everything, his job, his friends, his reputation. The people who once trusted him turned their backs on him, just as I had predicted. His exes, the women who had been part of his tangled web, reached out to me, thanking me for exposing the truth. His mother, when she saw the evidence, cut him out of her life entirely. I didn't hear from him again. As for me, I couldn't say I felt any sense of victory. There was no joy in seeing him unravel. The weight of everything I had done lingered, and there were moments when I wondered if it had been worth it. But deep down, I knew the answer. I had exposed the lies. I had brought the truth to light. And that, in itself, was enough. I left the apartment that we had shared, taking only what I needed. I didn't need to look back. I was free, and Ethan's world had crumbled under the weight of his own lies. As I walked away from the wreckage of what we had once had, I knew one thing for certain. The truth had won.